Hi everyone, Patrick Teahan here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. For the past month or so, I've been working on a childhood PTSD questionnaire to help my clients figure out if their present problems is in any way related to their childhood growing up. And while I was doing that, I figured it'd be a good idea to do a quick video on what childhood PTSD actually is. So we're going to get right into that in a moment, and then the questionnaire follows afterward. If at any given time in the video where you feel like it's too heavy or too much, just take a break and come back to it. So I hope it's helpful to you guys, and we'll just get right into it. So here goes. So when we think of our problems in life, we can look back on our childhood and ask, was it really that bad? You may also be wondering, well, what qualifies as child abuse really? And isn't every family dysfunctional? Well, let's look at a childhood PTSD research study. The CDC Kaiser Permanente Adverse Childhood Experience study from the mid to late 90s. It studies health risk of childhood PTSD over time, and it's actually still used and monitored by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The A study categorizes specific types of abuse experiences. The first category is abuse, which consists of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. The second category is neglect, which consists of emotional neglect and physical neglect. The third category is household dysfunction, which consists of substance abuse, domestic violence, incarceration, divorce, and mental illness. The more ACEs that a person qualifies for, the more health problems may be prevalent in their life. These are incredibly difficult things to overcome in adulthood. You can go online and take the ACE study questionnaire and figure out what your ACE score is. And I find that the study is extremely helpful about correlating childhood PTSD and adult health problems. However, I find that the questions tend to only isolate cases of extreme abuse, and low scores might contribute to erroneously ruling out childhood PTSD. Some of you may already know without a doubt that there was abuse in your childhood. And some of you may be thinking, I barely qualify for one ACE. Why am I not happy though? What gives? Let's take a hypothetical of two people from very different family systems. The first came from an alcoholic, sexually off, physically abusive, with constant fights, a depressed parent. That's like 5 ACEs and what I would call blatant abuse. And the other person came from a family system where there was an anxious parent, perhaps religious fundamentalism, deep criticism, no one could do emotions. Is that like one ACE? That's what we would call a tricky family, which is something we're going to come back to. Here's the thing though, in my experience, both of these people have very similar symptoms and problems. Intimacy problems, self-esteem problems, negative core beliefs, depression, anxiety, addictions, reactions, and attachment problems. So what is a tricky family? Well, a tricky family looks good on paper. Things seem normal. And 2, things seem stable in terms of providing basics for kids. Things like food, education, housing, things generally work. But the tricky family is deceivingly emotionally dysfunctional. And within that, a child's emotional and developmental needs are not met. Here are some examples of a tricky family. Well, one is having a parent who is emotionally shut down. Another is having parents with toxic intimacy between them or poor intimacy between them. Having a parent who has alcoholic behaviors, having a parent who is rageful, narcissistic, or authoritarian. Perhaps the family has major elephants in the room, family secrets, and can't talk about anything. Or that a child is abused outside of the home and they can't bring that information to mom and dad because it's not safe. Or simply that someone in the family has a medical illness and the children's feelings are not processed around that medical illness. So what does the tricky family have to do with the ACE study? Well, remember all those categories that we were looking at? In my experience, culturally, what I find is that we take these things at face value and we think about them in extremes only. Let's take mental illness, for example. I think when we think of the paradigm of mental illness, we think about schizophrenia, having a parent who's bipolar, having a parent with borderline personality disorder, or a parent that struggles with psychosis and suicidal ideation. But mental illness or mental health can also mean having a parent who's neurotic, a depressed or anxious parent, a parent with untreated PTSD and trauma themselves, a non-protective parent, or a parent who's self-consumed and unavailable. We can do this with the other categories from the A study. For example, physical abuse, well, that can mean beatings, but it can also mean spanking and corporal punishment. Emotional abuse, that can mean swearing at or humiliating a child, but it can also mean a child who is parentified or made into a surrogate spouse. Sexual abuse, that can mean physical sexual abuse, but that can mean having a child who's exposed to things like pornography or the adults being sexually off around the child. And domestic violence, that can certainly mean witnessing physical violence against a parent, but it can also mean witnessing verbal assault or threat of a violence. Here are some takeaways. In my experience, childhood PTSD is greatly underdiagnosed and misunderstood. 2. Childhood PTSD needs some redefining, as we often define it in extremes only. Severe beatings, sexual abuse, extreme neglect. And 3. Childhood PTSD treatment is more effective when we can clearly define abuse and inadequate parenting. Has family dysfunction affected you? If so, how? The questionnaire you're about to watch can be helpful in figuring that out, and in targeting specific behaviors and problems to work on in treatment with a therapist who gets it. Here are 30 of the 60 questions. You can pull the full questionnaire from my website. Answer these thinking over the course of your lifetime, not just in the present. The answer choices are yes, no, and maybe. Think of a maybe as a half yes. Ready? Here goes. Number 1. Growing up, one or both of my parents were rageful, volatile, dominating, depressed, unavailable, or neurotic. Number 2. Growing up, one or both of my parents were greatly dissatisfied or negative with each other. Number 3. Growing up, the adult's needs and feelings came first. Number 4. Growing up, things were not talked about, emotions, situations, or elephants in the room. Number 5. Rejection puts me in a very bad place. Number 6. I've consistently felt that there's something wrong with me and I feel defective. Number 7. I can be addicted to things: alcohol, food, drugs, sex, media, even caffeine. Number 8. I have relationship and intimacy problems. Number 9. I can isolate. Number 10. I tend to get through things rather than fully experience and enjoy them. Vacations, holidays, projects, shopping, gatherings. Number 11. I struggle with depression and/or anxiety. Number 12. I can have trouble feeling joy and/or spontaneity. Number 13. I can space out, disassociate, numb out, or feel empty. Number 14. Being wrong or right means too much to me. Number 15. I struggle with ambiguity, loose ends, things left up in the air, people not getting back to me. Number 16. When things are going well, I don't trust it. Number 17. I can set myself up by being too optimistic or can miss red flags. Think about this and how we judge people. Number 18. I have food, sleep, or energy issues, exhaustion and lethargy, and/or busy energy. Number 19. My libido is underactive or overactive. Number 20. Small talk can make me disinterested, irritated, or uncomfortable. Number 21. I have difficulty tapping into anger or possibly have too much of it. Number 22. I can be overly focused on fairness. Number 23. I can get upset when others don't read what is going on with me. Number 24. I can overpower or shut down during conflict. Number 25. I can have fights or arguments with people in my head. Number 26. I've been told I'm intense, too serious, or disengaged, too aloof. Number 27. After an intense conversation or situation, my feelings or thoughts catch up with me after a delay. Example, I should have said that. Number 28. I can be greatly affected by other people's moods, where I'm responsible for those moods or I feel threatened and become defensive. Number 29. I can be reactive or deeply affected by criticism. Number 30. My emotions and reactions can get in the way of my functioning or prevent me from being who I want to be. How to score. Add up all your yeses, and then add up your maybes and add them to your yeses for a second score. Any more than 5 yeses points to it being worthwhile to explore childhood with a skilled childhood PTSD therapist.